Yeah, I would probably, like, it's gonna be hard to tell, but I would probably end up notching that guy and that guy. Just to make sure you don't end up, because these are gonna cycle back. Maybe not that far.
So what we're running into here is that with the big reservoir that's on our shock, it's actually hitting the cross member in the bed on both shocks. And it's not too bad on this side. I cut it and was able to get enough room. This side's a lot worse. So what I'm ended up having to do is pull both shocks and make a relief cut in both cross members and kind of cut it out, box it in so it's still got some strength and doesn't get a bunch of dirt and everything up there. But gives us enough room for travel of the shocks as they move forward and back during the travel of the axle. So a little hiccup, but we'll get to that, and that way we can get the shocks in and keep going. So these are little pieces. First one's a little different size than the other because of the depth I had to cut into the one cross member, but just some simple plate, folded up. Already got them fit up in there, so we're just gonna burn them in. Alright, so as you can see, we've got our King shocks for the rear of the truck here. This is a stock Mopar shock out of a, I think, 2020 Dodge pickup. And this is about what this truck had, other than this one's aluminum body. But you can see the difference in all the features we have on this 4-tube bypass compared to just a stock little single tube shock. And these are really gonna up the game on this truck's handling and ride. So it's really cool to have all the adjustability for a top out zone and a bottom out zone and all your mid-range for compression and rebound. I mean, this is as cool as it gets, like without putting huge coilovers and everything else on the back. Like, this is pretty cool just to be able to bolt this on the truck and have all that adjustability to really make this thing drive great on the street or great off-road. Axles are in, we've got a lot of work to do from here, but they're hanging under the truck. You know, front shocks are on, rear springs and front springs are in. We got our track bar on the front here. Now it's we got to get our axle shafts in with our Dynatrac free spin kit and ball joints, and brakes all the way around, drive shafts, brake lines, all the little things and a couple of big things. And then we can finally get some tires and wheels on it and get it on the ground, but it's actually going pretty easy. I mean, this stuff you kind of got to wrestle around no matter if it's a new truck or an old truck. But it's going together nice. I'm excited. The axle looks awesome with our big beefy truss on there, and so all this Carli stuff, it just goes together really well. So we're gonna continue working. Now it's more front axle work, and not the funnest job for most people, but we're doing ball joints today. We got these awesome Dynatrac ball joints. This is about as good as it gets. They're not cheap, but they're worth it, and they're rebuildable. They always go in nice from what I've experienced. Never really had any problems with them. It's usually getting the old ones out that's more fun than anything else. First, we have our tools of the trade here, a couple sets of ball joint pullers and adapters, which is the easiest way to do it. I mean, I understand that there's people out there that do it with a rock and a hammer, but just go rent some tools, buy some from Harbor Freight, whatever you gotta do, get yourself a set of these. It makes life a lot easier. Figure out what combination of crap to use to get this thing in there. It's always really important to get your ball joints started evenly. So you might have seen there I kind of tapped the vise around with a hammer a little bit. and you just work it real slow at the beginning if you can't get it to start straight. Kind of tap around. You never want to just try and jam it up in there and try to get it to like find its own home, because you'll end up getting it in there crooked and it'll start to curl the metal on the inside, and then it's another hour. So you just kind of take it slow at first, and once it starts going up in there square, hammer it down and move on to the next one. One thing you want to remember anytime you're putting a new universal joint in, whether it's a drive shaft or your axle shaft assembly, is that when you press everything together, those caps go in a little over tight, and you get your clips in, and all you have to do to kind of, you'll notice your joint's a little tighter than it needs to be, and that'll create a problem. It'll create a vibration, it'll wear out your joint faster. So what you end up having to do, and you don't have to hit it very hard, is you just lightly tap on the top corner and the bottom corner around each joint, and your whole joint will loosen up kind of where it needs to be. The caps go out tight against the clips, and it's just a good precaution. I mean, it's something you need to do when you do this, because I don't know how many times I've seen a guy come into the shop where it's like, oh, I just changed the U-joints in my truck and the vibration got worse. Well, the joint's too tight, so give it a couple of taps with a hammer and it's fixed. So we got that all done on both of the axle shafts. Now we just got to slam them in the truck, and then we can start putting our Dynatrac free spin kit on, which comes with new spindles, new hubs, and all the bearings and everything. So we're going to get started on that. So what we have here is the rest of our Dynatrac free spin kit. And it consists of a conventional style spindle and hub with conical bearings. And this is like what you'd see in an old Dana 60 or an old Dana 44, that kind of style, which is pretty tried and true. And it allows you to get some adjustment out of your bearings. You can set the preload and everything, which is something you can't do on a hub unit bearing. You can also disassemble it and service it, which is something you really can't do on a unit bearing. It also allows us to put a conventional style locking hub on the outside, which helps reduce wear on all your axle components, because you can unlock your hubs, which disconnects the axle from the hub and lets everything spin freely. It's called a free spin kit. And really cuts down on the wear and tear on your axle U-joints, your front differential, your front driveline U-joints. You get better mileage out of your truck because you're not driving all that, you don't have all that extra drag of your front axle. So this is really good money spent on any newer truck that has a unit bearing assembly on it, because a lot of guys know, a lot of Dodge guys know, hub unit bearings don't last very long. And especially where we live, where we've got road salt and everything else, something you're changing out every couple years, and it's a good few $100s and a lot of effort. So this is something to cure that problem. There's a really cool invention that's a cone that you put your wheel bearing into it, and then you spin this other cone down on it, and then you put a grease gun on there and just pump the grease gun, and it just forces grease throughout the whole thing. They cost like $10 at any parts store. We don't have one here. All right, so this is like, I've already had a couple of mishaps trying to put these hubs together, but got them figured out now. First thing you do is start with this big spacer ring. It gets slid all the way into the back. And then you got this big flat washer, which has a machined groove in the one side and it's completely flat on the other. You want the flat side out. And then we have our outer lock here. And it's always good, you got to use as much grease as you can. Keep everything lubed up here. So on our outer lock, there's a spring on the back side here. Make sure you get that in. Get some grease all over everything here. Get that slid locked in. So we have our interlock with a brass bushing. Brass bushing has a chamfer on one side. That goes towards the gear. Get that lined up, slide it in, spin it till it locks. You got this fancy little spring lock clip here. You gotta kinda hold the gear in and, that's slippery. Hold your gear in, work this clip all the way around. They're kind of a bear. Not like the normal traditional C-clip that you'd think of holding the end of an axle on. Alright, once you get that locked in, move on to your outer pieces here. Get some more grease. Now this is actually what engages and disengages your two interlocks here. As this turns, or as your hub turns, it pushes this ring out, which separates that inner gear from this one. Got another big spring lock clip. Feed that one in. Everything is locked in good and solid. Clean all that goopy crap off your hands. Now we've got our nice locking hub. Go ahead and get this set up, get it kind of lined up where it needs to go. Line up our bolt holes there. Locked in there. Turn this. Unlocked. No noises. Good to go. All right, so now we get to move on to some more fun stuff. Got our heavy duty steering setup from Synergy, and these are always great. These are a go-to for steering components. Got a tie rod and a drag link. We're gonna install those next. This is a really good part for any truck where you think you're gonna need it. And on stuff with a diesel engine and big tires, you want a steering box brace. This bolts on underneath the stock sway bar and has a bearing that goes on along with a new big old fancy bushing here. It threads on with a lock washer. The bearing slips up there, and it's held by that bracket to support the sector shaft of your steering box. And it just helps with your steering feel if it makes everything flex around with big tires and all that. So that'll get rid of a little bit of that and helps extend the life of your steering box. So that'll be the next thing we throw on. So we gotta finish up a little clamp and some stuff here, but went ahead and bolted it all the way in. Normally you'd put your sway bar mounts right here. I think the sway bar we have is either on back order or we're not putting one in at all. So for now we're just gonna get this all tight. If we have to put the sway bar on later, pretty easy. Just take 4 bolts out, put it on. Also, you'll notice that we have the backing plates on here. You probably didn't see when we were putting all the spindles and everything on. They weren't on there, and I forgot to put them on, dug them out, slammed them in real quick, just for video continuity there. So now I got about, I don't know, 900 bolts to tighten and kind of get everything checked and squared up where it needs to be. And then we can start moving on to, I don't know, brakes, wheels, tires, driving, maybe, we'll see.